So Leeds lead the way in the Championship. Wild Thing Shrews gave Birmingham the Blues in League One. And Nathan Lowe has got Walsall asking, how high can we go in League Two? I'm Matt Watts. He's George Elek. This is the Not the Top 20 Monday pod. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who is this guy and what has he done with Ali? Fear not. Ali is absolutely fine. He will be back in your ears once again very soon. George, the chairman called me yesterday afternoon. He asked if I'd take the team for today's pod. I said yes, of course. It's been a crazy 24 hours in the world of Not the Top 20, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been. When you say the chairman gave you a call, does that mean that Ali's the chairman? Because if he is, I think you're going to need to work out your hierarchy a bit better, because I rule the roost here. Yeah, great to have you involved, Matt. Someone who has been part of the NTT20 family for 18 months or so now, running our social channels. Also the host of Under the Lights, which is our midweek podcast that is for our Substack subscribers on ntt20.com. So if you like the cut of Matt's jib today, that's another reason you should go and subscribe over there. And also the host of 72cast, which is your own projects, which you interview some people who are important within the EFL, such as recently Harrogate keeper James Belshaw, and even idiots like me and Ali too.
Very harsh on yourself, very kind on me. Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, no pressure with getting a few more subs for Under the Lights either. Anyway, I think that's enough about me. Let's talk about some football. And I wanted to kick off in the Championship, of course, with the game that took place on Sunday. Leeds won a 7-goal thriller to go top of the Championship. George, tell us about this one.
What a game. I mean, this wasn't a game that I had marked down as being likely to be a goal fest, to end 4-3, to be packed with loads of drama, but that's exactly what it was. Sandwiched in between, as the Championship game often is on a Sunday, between two fairly eventful Premier League games. I think actually the Championship game was probably the pick of the bunch. It was, for Leeds, who had the opportunity to go top, winning this game, no spoilers as to what happened on Saturday, but knowing that they would have gone top had they won this game, for them to start by conceding a ridiculously easy goal from Swansea with Harry Darling, basically just walking through the Leeds backline, and it wasn't even a header. It was a whipped-in free kick from Grimes that he managed to steer home. Really poor defending, and very unlike Leeds to concede, not only just to concede a goal and an easy chance like that, but also in the manner that they conceded it too. It was surprising to see them do that. But as it transpired, as we know with Leeds, despite, it often is the case for Daniel Farke's side that, especially away from home, once they go behind, they can struggle to really wrestle control back in the game. But that wasn't the case here. And even though the headlines and the plaudits will go to Manor Solomon, whose loan spell from Spurs really kicked off here with 2 goals, including the equaliser after 20 minutes. The architect was Dan James, who was the key player on the pitch on the day, probably the best player on the pitch on the day. And it was his run down the right-hand side and ball into Solomon that created the first goal. And from there, you probably thought that Leeds were going to continue to ramp up, especially because, with Swansea, as we know they do under Luke Williams, continuing to look to play and get the ball down, which you kind of feel suits Leeds, who can often struggle to break down a low block. And maybe that's why this game was much more high scoring than other ones that we've seen. But there was a bit of a fly in the ointment for them, with Liam Cullen scoring a deflected effort that kind of somehow squeezed in the bottom left-hand corner just before half-time, deflected off Jayden Bogle's foot. So again, a test of the mettle of Leeds, and they responded pretty well. Cabango diverting home a cross that was headed for Joel Peru to score himself. Another great bit of play by Dan James to create the goal. And then Solomon getting his second on the day with a really good ball over the top that Sam Byram found space on the left-hand side to square it to Solomon to finish off. And that was kind of the case all day with Leeds, with their James on the right-hand side, and then it was Byram then on the left getting a lot of space in behind. But then what happened, Matt? Absolute carnage. If I'm going to be honest, I'd watched this game, and with about 2 minutes to go, it was my daughter's tea time. So I was like, right, what I do when this has to happen is I turn up the volume unbelievably loud on the TV, so that when I'm in the kitchen, if something happens, I can hear it and I can run through. And I heard something, and I ran through, and I saw Swansea players celebrating. Bianchini with a goal, a brilliant assist from Josh Tymon, such good delivery from the left-hand side to get the goal. And I thought, wow, Leeds are falling apart again. Can't believe it. I went back next door to carry on feeding her fish fingers, and I hear another scream, and I think, no, surely not again. Surely Swansea haven't made it 4-3. And I run through and see substitute Willie Gnonto scoring a famous winner. So a huge win for Leeds, an incredibly dramatic game. Swansea will feel so frustrated that they weren't able to get a point out of it. Leeds, I think, will probably feel a little bit concerned. They conceded 3 on the road, albeit Swansea were fairly clinical on the day. But in terms of what it means over the weekend, and it's seeing them rise to the top of the table again, I wouldn't be that surprised if Leeds were now top of the table for the foreseeable future.
Was a phenomenal finish to a phenomenal game. And I think one thing that really struck me was the fact that in Swansea's previous 15 league games, they'd only scored 11 goals. And in Leeds' previous 15 league games, they'd only conceded 9 goals. So we weren't really sort of expecting it to be a 7-goal thriller. As a neutral, I found it really frustrating watching Swansea defend because, as you say, against Leeds, most teams drop into that low block. Swansea didn't do that. They pushed quite high with their defensive line, but that defensive line was just so squiffy all afternoon. And when you're playing against the likes of Dan James and Manor Solomon, Wilfred Gnonto, you can't afford your defensive line to be all over the place. And unfortunately, there were probably 2 or 3 goals where the goals have come from that defensive line not kind of being in line, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess part of that, some teams are going to set up to play a certain way against Leeds, and I think kind of credit to Swansea to an extent where we've seen so many teams come up against Leeds and barely lay a glove on them in terms of chance creation, in terms of within the way the game goes as well. And yeah, I would agree with you that the way that Swansea set up, it suited Leeds to a T, and the fact that James had so much space to run into on the right hand side, the fact that their high line was continually exploited, it was maybe naive, but I think the product of that probably meant that it was 4-3 rather than them losing the game to 0, as we've seen so many teams face against Leeds. So, yeah, I would agree with your analysis, but I think it's refreshing to see a side come up against Leeds and think to themselves, how can we hurt them? Can we stick to our own guns rather than just looking to negate their threat?
It did make for a more entertaining game, and also if Swansea were playing against a team who maybe didn't have the same quality as Leeds, they might not have been punished, but there we go. George, I'm sorry to lower the tone, but we have to go from a 7-goal thriller to an 8-goal game that took place on Saturday lunchtime. Oxford 2, Middlesbrough 6. Talk me through it.
Do we have to? Yeah, I mean, this was a pretty hellish afternoon for Oxford fans. But Boro, the headline here, I think, is Middlesbrough continuing to show just how good a side that they are. For the first half an hour or so of this game, there wasn't much between the two teams. Greg Lee put Oxford ahead, prodding home from a knockdown from a set piece. And it wasn't like it was massively against run of play. It wasn't like Oxford were by far the better side either, but there wasn't much between the two teams. Now, Latalata missed a couple of decent opportunities early on. But what came after that was fairly brutal. Latalata getting a hat-trick, the first of which a penalty, with Elliot Moore scything down Ben Doak, who was, as he always is, a real threat down the right-hand side. Finn Azaz with a both of his goals were just stroked into the back of the net from the edge of the area. The first one, I think Jamie Cumming will probably feel like he could have done better with. Latalata put through by Azaz for the second goal. Again, if there's a player who can pick a lot better than Azaz from those kind of deep central areas, I'm yet to see a really good chip ball over to Latalata to finish off. Some questions of offside, but on the replay it's pretty clear that he wasn't offside. Latalata getting his hat-trick as well with another nicely taken goal. Dane Scarlett thought, maybe he got Oxford back into it at 4-2 with a well-taken strike. He, I think, has to start for Oxford in midweek. Mark Harris really struggling in front of goal at the moment. Scarlett full of confidence and another well-taken finish from him. But any hopes that we had of a comeback were put to rest when Tommy Conway off the bench again. The story of the day here was Boro finding the corners from range, and that's what Conway managed to do, getting them on the left-hand side, shimmy inside, then firing it kind of back across himself into the bottom left-hand corner. Boro are going to have days where they don't all go in. They've had days already this season when they haven't all gone in, which is pretty much why they aren't towards the top end of the table now. But it feels like things are clicking. It feels like Latalata struggles in front of goal are over. It feels like Azaz coming up against keepers who are able to save his very well-placed shots is done for. They're just a really, really good side. And right now, the league table might not reflect this, but as I said on Football Corner a couple of weeks ago, if you're looking for the best team in the league right now alongside Leeds, Sunderland are obviously up there, Blades are obviously up there, but Boro have to be a pretty big part of that conversation.
Yeah, it's the first time since 1960 that Boro have scored 6 on the road. They've scored 15 goals in their last 3 games. They scored 14 goals in their first 13 games. Obviously, we know that they were underperforming their XG, but they're certainly making up for it now. And also, when you look at some of the individual stats, Tommy Conway and Emmanuel Latte-Lath, 10 goals combined in their last 6 games. And then, as you mentioned, Finn Azaz, 5 goals and 5 assists in his last 5 starts. That is absolutely insane, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, they're top quality players, and I know that with certainly with Azaz, he showed over a period of time at Argyle how good he is, and it's taken a bit of time for him to show that at Boro, and there were some people doubting him at Boro early on. But he's just a quality operator. Again, we spoke about it on Football Mob Corner a couple of weeks ago. His ability to hurt you with his passing and his shooting, his ability to score all kinds of goals are so impressive. And then Latte-Lath at the back end of last season, we saw what a good goal scorer he is. And now playing in a side that are consistently creating big chances, I think he's going to score a lot of goals. And Conway is the striker who can push him, who will also start a lot of games and will score goals when he plays. It's hard to find many weaknesses right now with Boro. And it feels like Michael Carrick's been on a bit of a journey with his Boro side. And now we're coming towards the kind of final piece of the jigsaw being in. And the finished product is a pretty relentlessly good attacking side.
From 2 high-scoring games to 2 1-0 wins, Luton beat Hull 1-0 at Kenilworth Road. Obviously, it was a couple of weeks ago we saw Rob Edwards looking quite downhearted and quite dishevelled after his side's defeat to Middlesbrough. They bounced back after the international break with a victory. Just how big is this for Rob and the Hatters?
Really big. I mean, he looked fairly dishevelled again after the game here. It doesn't look like he got much sleep over international break. I worry for him a little bit. He's obviously someone who he's incredibly emotional. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and when he talks in interviews, he's so honest that I hope there are people looking after him, because it's a stressful business. And this will hopefully alleviate some of that stress for him, albeit not for Tim Walter at Hull. They were okay. This wasn't by any stretch Luton's best performance of the season. I think Luton have played way better than this season and lost games. Mark McGuinness scored from a corner, which was the moment in the game that turned the tie. You could see the relief. He's another one who came in the summer with big hopes for a big fee and has been widely criticised. And you could see how his emotions were very obvious, and the relief was very obvious when he scored that goal. Hull will feel very frustrated they weren't able to get something from this game, given the chances that they had in the second half. Joao Pedro in particular missed one really good opportunity from the cross, just under the post and wasn't under the bar, I should say. Wasn't able to divert it home. Bedia had a good chance very late on as well, which he missed. So, I was on a Hull podcast after the loss against Oxford, and they said, when does enough for Walter? And my point was like, well, yeah, I mean, the results are really bad, but pretty consistently in games, you're getting quite unlucky here. And I think this falls into that category where in the second half, they are by far the better team, and they've conceded a set-piece goal and lost the game 1-0. I think a lot of people are maybe expecting we'll get an announcement from Hull fairly soon, but if they are looking at the underlying numbers, then maybe he'll be given more of a chance. But it does feel like the relationship between him and the fans is breaking down to quite a degree.
Yeah, and it's really tricky with Hull, because when you look at their games, they are creating chances, but they're winless in 8. They've lost their last 3. They failed to score in 7 of their 16 league games, and they've only got 1 clean sheet so far this season in the league. So the numbers really aren't great. As you say, really important win for Luton. They weren't at their best, but 1-0 to Luton, set-piece goal, kind of feels like a bit of a throwback to their promotion season, doesn't it? The other 1-0 win that I wanted us to talk about was Bristol City 0, Burnley 1. Now, I know that you had this circled as a statement Bristol City performance, but Burnley managed to get the job done. And for all of our moaning about their attack, the defensive stats are absolutely insane. 6 goals conceded in 16 league games. Hugh Davis reckons that this is the fewest goals conceded by any team at this stage of a second-tier season since the 1920s.
It's a ridiculous record. And it's funny with Burnley because I'm part of the camp where I think we should expect more from them, and given the attacking players they've got at their disposal, they should be scoring more goals, they should be more dominant, they should create more chances. But then you look at the points tally, and you look at the goals conceded, and you look at the XG conceded, and then you watch this game, which I watched because I put up Bristol City draw no bet in the betting show, so I watched this game, and there were good value for it. Like, there were a couple of moments in transition where Bristol City picked the wrong pass. Mehmeti went very close at 0-0 early on, a deflected effort that just dribbled wide. And there were kind of, the threat levels of Bristol City probably, equated higher than their kind of actual chance creation. But that's credit to Burnley, where, they played their high line. They dominated possession for the most part until the last half an hour, where they massively dropped off and let Bristol City have the ball, which I think was actually, even though it would have been fairly frustrating for Burnley fans to see them drop off to that extent, my hunch is that they've done their research. They know that Liam Manning and his side generally really struggle to break down a low block, and that was the case again here. With only Hirakawa's one-on-one, where he took a really heavy first touch. That should have been a good chance, but that first touch meant that even though Trafford was fairly hesitant to come out, he was still able to get there in time in order to make the save. The goal came itself from kind of a diverted, deflected shot that kind of was then parried away and fell to the path of Jadon Anthony. It was by no means kind of a free-flowing, good attacking move, but if you are a side like Burnley who just refuse to, who don't concede any goals and don't concede many chances, then if you've got the attacking quality of certain players, like Josh Brownhill was very good on the day, as he often is, then you're probably going to create enough in the game to win games. It sounds begrudging, but it's just, it is, I think I have to keep telling myself with Burnley that, you have to, being a really, really strong defensive unit and ensuring that you concede so few goals is a credible way to success and to win games. And against Bristol City here, there were by no means a huge gulf between the two sides. But Burnley went ahead early and were relatively untroubled in maintaining their advantage and won 3 points. And I think that's going to be a blueprint for loads of their wins this season, and has been already for the most part.
My only other note on this game was a Burnley manager, in this case Scott Parker, wearing a hat and gloves in November. It's just not very Burnley, is it?
What's weird about this is that it was really cold Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then I reckon Scott didn't look at the weather forecast. And obviously it was windy and it was rainy, but it was like 13 degrees. It wasn't that cold. I mean, hat I can definitely accept. Gloves. I mean, what do you need to clap really loudly? What are you going to do? Take them off? Wouldn't see Fergie wearing gloves.
Absolutely not. Before we talk a bit more about the weather and the effect that Storm Bert had on the EFL, I wanted to mention the fact that it's 1 month today until Christmas Day. It's not a bad time to be launching some pod merch, is it?
No, it is, I think, a good time. The day is finally here. Well, it's nearly here. We've been listening to the tens of you who have got in touch over the last 8 years, maybe not even that, asking for some NTT20 merch. And we've done it. So it's not quite ready for launch yet, but keep your eyes peeled on our social channels over the course of this week, because we are going to be releasing some branded hats, hoodies, t-shirts. Make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that. If anyone wants to buy that, we'll be ready in time for Christmas to gift to your friends and family, or just buy for yourself. So we're really excited about it. Looking forward to having in the future, going to a game, you can be in the terraces, or you can be waiting in a queue for your pie and see someone wearing an NTT20 branded hat, and you can go and give each other a nice big hug.
There were 7 draws and a postponement in the Championship this weekend. The first draw came on Friday night. Now, I said to my wife, do you fancy watching a film? We didn't really fancy it. We weren't kind of in the mood for it, but we ended up watching 50 Shades of Grey, because Andre Gray produced 2 stunning strikes for Plymouth against Watford. The second one in particular in stoppage time, absolutely exquisite. Plymouth continue this habit of scoring late goals at home this season. There was also a really strange incident in this game where Vacuum Bio opened the scoring for Watford, and it was one of those bizarre goals where the ball hits the back of the net and there is a significant delay before the Watford fans realise that it's gone in and start celebrating. It reminded me of COVID times when they used to play the goal music and they used to play it far too late. But yeah, a really good game to kick off the weekend. There was another 2-2 draw on Saturday lunchtime. This was between Coventry and Sheffield United. There was another goal in this one for Tyrese Campbell, another goal and assist for Jez Raksaki, who continues to impress. But we need to talk about Norman Bassett, Coventry's young Belgian international, because he got on the score sheet, his first goal for Coventry, but he also produced some serious housery to help get Anel Amihodzic sent off before half-time. Obviously, Bobby Thomas scored Coventry's second equaliser of the game, 10 minutes from time. He was unmarked from a corner, a really disappointing way for Chris Wilder's 10 men to concede. But George, what did you make of Norman Bassett and this 2-2 draw?
Yeah, it's with it kind of goes back to the conversation we had around Perry and G getting Sissoko of Argyle sent off, where, you know, obviously Bassett knows exactly what he's doing. We can see by the wink and the kiss after the event that he's pretty chuffed that he's managed to get it right. But like, do we want this? I mean, I you know, from a Coventry perspective, I can understand why you would think it's hilarious and really embrace it. But in terms of the actual action, where, you know, Bassett, obviously we have the off the ball incident to start with, and then we have the foul, and then we've got Bassett going over behind Amihodzic and like squeezing the back of his neck, and that it's so obviously there just to really wind up Amihodzic that he then gets up and holds him by the throat. And when we had this conversation about NG last time, had loads of people comment on the YouTube video and message me on Twitter and be like, look, when you raise your hand to someone's face, then that is a red card. I'm like, okay, fine. But do you not want to look at the context? So why is going over to someone who is lying on the floor, face down, and squeezing the back of their neck acceptable, yet reacting to that and grabbing someone by the front of their neck, you know, you have to walk, that's unacceptable. It really frustrates me how happy we are as a footballing community to basically incentivise the behaviour of people to wind others up, even though from a pure theatre and pantomime level, it's quite funny. And, you know, maybe if we're all happy to embrace and be like, let's really go for it. But then, you know, I guess to the same extent you could argue that when people pull off a dive and it works, it's quite funny too. But if you say that, it's sacrilege. So it's all a bit silly, I think. But it was the turning point of this game. And also that's the other thing, like for Sheffield United perspective, you know, even though Amihodzic should obviously know better and should obviously not react in the way that he does, but we're all humans, and, you know, we've all reacted when we got frustrated about something. We've all expressed our frustration in ways that we probably look back on and think that wasn't really what we should have done, and that was the case here. Frustration as well, I guess, for Blades, that they were having defended with 10 men for so long, then conceded from just the most open, free set piece goal you're going to see. Bobby Thomas just completely unmarked and able to divert the ball home. So, you know, Bassett making himself a bit of a hero for Coventry. He's someone who I like the look of in terms of a player. You know, he looks like a bit of a live wire up front and certainly knows how to carry himself. And for Coventry, you know, that's now 2 comeback 2-2 draws against 2 of the best teams in the league, against Sunderland and Sheffield United. So plenty for Frank to work with if and when he's appointed. From
Coventry to West Bromwich, and West Brom and Norwich drew 2-2 at the Hawthorns. There was a lovely goal in this one from Mason Holgate, of all people. There wasn't a goal for Borja Sainz, no matter how much he tried to claim it, but he is still absolutely cooking for Norwich. It's also worth noting that Tom Fellows to Josh Maja has now led to 5 goals this season, which is the most in the league. Maja's finish, once again, was absolutely exquisite. Millwall and Sunderland, they drew 1-1 at the Den. There was a late equaliser for Millwall from Femi Aziz. Now, Milan Aleksic could and probably should have put Sunderland 2-0 up moments before Aziz levelled for Millwall. There was an excellent strike as well in the first half from Aaron Connolly, a really well-struck low volley to give Sunderland the lead. It's now 4 draws in a row for Sunderland. We know that they are depleted at the minute with suspensions and injuries, but 4 draws in a row for them. 8 games unbeaten for Millwall. They haven't scored more than a single goal in any of those games, but they don't need to because they defend so well. Sheffield Wednesday and Cardiff, they drew 1-1. Goals from Ollie Tanner and Deshaun Bernard. QPR and Stoke, they also drew 1-1. The cannon went off again for Stoke, but a Ben Gibson own goal levelled things up for the hosts. It's now 12 league games without a win for QPR. They're also the lowest scorers in the league. It doesn't help that Zanzilar missed a penalty in the first half and someone pressed the goal music button by mistake as well, which was incredibly awkward. But Salah has now taken 22 shots without scoring this season, and only 5 of them have been on target. Preston and Derby, they drew 1-1 at Deepdale. There was a lovely header in this one from Sam Greenwood, but that was cancelled out by Jerry Yates, who has now scored in 3 consecutive games. And of course, the other game that was meant to take place in the Championship, Blackburn v Portsmouth, that one was postponed due to Storm Burt. George, anything from those games that caught your eye?
I loved the Cannon goal for Stoke. You know, it's interesting seeing a striker full of confidence in Cannon and then one who is really struggling to find any kind of way to score a goal in Zanzilar. Really frustrating for him. And there was an interesting Hugh Davis, getting a lot of mentions today, Hugh. Messaged me yesterday with pointing out that Nicholas Madsen is a penalty taker extraordinaire, where he scored 10 spot kicks for Westerlo last season and has converted 13 penalties consecutively from the spot, and he was on the pitch. So why he didn't take the penalty and Salah did, I guess it's just an attempt to try and get Salah his first goal to get him up and running. And he kind of did everything right, sat the keeper down and then just rolled it the wrong side of the post. And then, just incredible scenes in Millwall, Sunderland, with the way that goal came about. Also, just want to give credit to Aaron Connolly with a really nice taken goal for that one. But the way that Millwall were able to go from back to front so quickly and so late with Aziz getting the all-important goal will give them a huge boost and continues their unbeaten run. Lots of very good draws here. Definitely not games that happened, and plenty of intrigue heading into the full championship slate that is taking place this midweek. And for those of you who've enjoyed Matt and I talking about the games rather than Ali and I, then we will be doing so again in midweek on Under the Lights, which you can find at ntt20.com for subscribers there.
In League One, Gareth Ainsworth took charge of Shrewsbury Town for the first time this weekend. Now, heading into Saturday's game, they were bottom of the league. They'd lost 6 in a row in all competitions. They had 1 win at home all season, and they faced the daunting prospect of a visit from Birmingham City. Wild thing, you make my heart sing.
It's just absolutely unbelievable, this. I mean, there can't be... When you look at discrepancy of revenue and performance on the pitch and everything else, this has to be one of the biggest EFL upsets in recent times. Now, I know that Shrewsbury fans wouldn't want to be painted as too much of a David versus the Birmingham obvious Goliath, and it's no disrespect to them. It's more just a case of like, this is a Shrewsbury side who have had to make a change in terms of the manager, who have some serious issues off the field at the moment with the desire for a sale to be made as soon as possible, and are staring down the barrel at a relegation to League Two up against a Birmingham side who started the season incredibly well, who spent tens of millions of pounds on players, who believe that this will be one very short season spent at League One, and yet they were able to beat them. And beat them, even though it was a 3-2 scoreline. The telling thing for me was that when this game, when Bloxham steered home from Marquis to make the score 3-1 in this game, Birmingham had only had 4 shots within it. So it wasn't, often with these kind of games, we see, the smash and grabber under the cosh and have to take their chances and having to deal with an onslaught of goal scoring opportunities. That just wasn't really the case here. And even if you look, FOTMOB have Birmingham's XG for the game as 1.69, but 0.78 or so of that will be Stansfield's penalty. So from open play, like from in the game itself, they didn't create a great deal, and partly that was because of how well drilled Ainsworth's Shrewsbury were. Like, it's always hard to know how much of an impact a manager can have in a short space of time. But if there's one manager who I think can have a massive impact in a short space of time, probably both positively and negatively, it's Gareth Ainsworth, because he's different. He's different in the way that he carries himself, the way he talks about football, the way he demands buy-in from his players. And, I said it last week that I kind of thought with Ainsworth it can go both ways. Either you have what happened at Wycombe, where everyone buys in and it's a success, or you have what happened at QPR, where everyone raises their eyebrows and thinks, who the hell is this guy? And, quite quickly things unravel. And it feels to me pretty obvious off the back of this result and performance, like he's got buy-in from the Shrewsbury Town players. Aaron Pierre with a really nicely taken opener from a bit of a set-piece routine. John Marquis profiting from some really bad defensive work, and the ball kind of fell to him kindly to make it 2-0. Iwata scoring the kind of goal we've seen him score a lot this season, just planting the ball in the corner from the edge of the area. And then the strangest goal was the Bloxham goal, where like John Marquis isn't quick, and yet he seemed to be able to scamper in behind the Birmingham back line. I think it was Clara who just looked worryingly slow and wasn't really able to kind of catch up with Marquis, who then squared it to Bloxham to score. Stansfield in the penalty to make it 2-1, but Shrewsbury saw the game out. Now, I may or may not have tweeted about this, given that a few weeks ago on the pod I spoke about Birmingham and said I thought maybe a sticky patch was incoming. They've drawn 1-1 with Mansfield, drawn 1-1 with Northampton, and then lost here since then. Now, the Mansfield game, they should have been well ahead by the time Mansfield equalised against Northampton, even though Cobbler's missed a couple of chances. Again, they dominated that game and conceded late. I would say that definitely the Northampton game and probably the first half of the Mansfield game were better performances in many ways to what we'd seen in some games from Birmingham earlier on in the campaign, which they won. This was very different, where they looked a little bit lost as to how to break down a resolute low block, and they look really vulnerable from set pieces and on the counter-attack. I've got no doubt that they will sort it out, and I've got no doubt that another long winning run is probably on the horizon, but it just definitely does feel now like a few weeks ago we were talking about League One as if it was a foregone conclusion, but with certain teams, Wycombe certainly one of them, Stockport another one, even Bolton turning it around, Huddersfield playing better, it now does feel like they're going to be kept up to task. I've seen a few Birmingham fans question Chris Davis's selection at the moment, with certain players seemingly kind of getting a bit of a free pass. And naturally, when you struggle to, or when you lose a couple of games, fans are going to always point the finger at the manager and ask questions and pick apart certain decisions. So yeah, we'll see. But a huge win. I think that's the thing to focus on here is for Birmingham frustration, but it won't be long till they're winning games again. But this is a massive, massive win for Shrews and for Ainsworth, and showing the rest of League One that they shouldn't be written off yet as a team that can pull off a bit of a great escape.
Yeah, and I think we spoke about it a few weeks ago on Under the Lights, the fact that the likes of Shrewsbury and Burton were starting to get a little bit detached. We spoke about the fact that there's so much of the season still to go, and you look at Shrewsbury off the back of this win, they're now just 5 points from safety. And they also have this kind of spring in their step, which they simply didn't have before. We all saw the scenes at full time with Gareth Ainsworth going around the ground, applauding the supporters. There's a real kind of feel-good factor there all of a sudden. And I think also, just one thing I wanted to mention on Shrewsbury, I've seen quite a few people tweeting about it at the weekend, quite a few kind of big accounts pointing to the fact that they only had 20% possession, but they weren't highlighting the fact that they restricted Birmingham to 5 shots on target. So for me, that's the key here. Yes, they've only had 20% possession, but they've restricted a really good side with, seriously high quality players to 5 shots on target. So yeah, absolutely. Credit to Shrewsbury and credit to Wild Thing as well. Obviously, that victory was really popular with one of his former clubs, Wycombe Wanderers, because they are now 4 points clear at the top of League One after their 3-2 victory over Lincoln. Wycombe have 35 points from their opening 15 games. They've scored 35 goals in their opening 15 games as well, and it's 7 wins in a row in the EFL for the first time in their history. George, would you like to push the button?
It is football corner time. Yes, pushing that button to talk about Wycombe Wanderers, and it's probably, we probably should have done this sooner, to be honest, because they are unquestionably one of the stories of the EFL season so far, and we need to look into why are Wycombe Wanderers good, who are the key players, and crucially, is this sustainable? Because we've often seen teams start fast and then in November and people get very excited and then they drop off and then people hold them against that early season form. So is this a Wycombe Wanderers side that we should be expecting to challenge for the title, or is this a team that we can expect to kind of drift into a top 6 challenge? Now, firstly, as we often do on Football Corner, we'll have a look at the goals numbers, and they've scored the most goals per 90 in the whole division. 2.3 goals per 90, even higher than both, and significantly higher than Peterborough and Birmingham. So that's a fair start. Defensive record, not quite so good. 1.2 goals conceded per 90, has them around and about mid-table. When we look at the expected goals number, a total XG for the whole season so far is 25.2. They've scored 35 goals. So that is a bit of a red flag, you have to say. Like, I don't want to put a dampener on it. I'm just reporting the facts here. Do not shoot the messenger. But, over-indexing your expected goals number by 10 goals is a bit of a concern. The one thing that you always have to look at, I think, when you're looking at XG numbers in kind of binary terms is, well, by how far are they beating teams? Because if you've got a team who are consistently beating teams, by a solitary goal here or there, who are massively overperforming their numbers, then that's a much bigger red flag than if they're thumping teams. And Wycombe's goal difference is 17, plus 17, the best in the league by 3 goals. And over the course of 15 games, suggests that they are effectively averaging over a single goal margin victory per game, which, when you consider they're not winning every game, is in itself pretty impressive. So I would mitigate the worries about the XG4 number a little bit by just pointing out that they are fairly dominant within games and could probably afford to revert to the mean and still pick up points fairly regularly, even if not as regularly as they are now. XG against 15.1 over the course of the campaign. They've conceded 18 goals, so they are they're conceding more goals than they should have. So that's another reason to be relatively optimistic. Now, if we look at Wycombe's run of wins, like, it is unbelievable what they've done in terms of the consistency of their victories and their ability to win these games. And it's no surprise that it's a record for the club of consecutive wins, given it's not very often that teams do this, let alone teams that came into the season relatively unfancied. But I do think there's been a bit of a shift in terms of what we've seen from Wycombe over the course of the season. Like, it's very easy for us to look at teams and see them as having an identity and see them as a force, and not factor in the fact that teams change, whether that is improvement or a regression, or because certain players are playing well or badly, or certain players are injured or whatever else. It's way more fluid than often the kind of general conversation will lead you to believe. If we look at a result from earlier in the campaign where they went away to Blackpool and drew 2-2, in that game, Blackpool dominated the shot count. Blackpool won the XG battle, 2.5, 0.65. This was a game, an away performance, where Wycombe took their chances, which were fewer, and were able to rely on some keeping and Blackpool missing chances in order to win the game. Sorry, to draw the game. And then again, you look at Rotherham, also earlier in the season, they win the game 2-0, but 1.32 XG for Wycombe, of which one was a penalty scored by Kieran Sadlier. So if you take that out, it's an XG of like 0.5 up against a Rotherham side that had loads of chances. A 1.18 XG. Again, probably looking at a game where, on the balance of play, you could argue they maybe weren't good value for their 2-0 win, let alone their win. But things have massively shifted since then. Like, you've got a 5-0 win away at Stockport, where they restricted Stockport to just 4 shots and a 2.66 XG for themselves. Even though the 5 goals may have been flattering a little bit, it was a completely dominant win where they, the chances of them not winning this game based on those numbers and those shot locations was very, very slim. Then have the 3-2 win on Saturday against Lincoln, where Lincoln may have had quite a few shots. They scored 2 goals from their 0.8 XG, but Wycombe 3.34 expected goals, of which one was a missed penalty from Luke Leahy. So even if you take that out, they're still pretty good value for their 3-goal haul. So I think there's an argument here that Wycombe maybe looked like early on in the campaign the good results were unsustainable, but as time is going on, they're improving. Then if we, part of this, I mentioned penalties there, they have been awarded the most penalties in the league this season with 4, albeit Leahy missing the one on Saturday. My guess is that Richard Coney will continue to take them, having now scored 2 already this season. I'm not entirely sure why he didn't take the one on Saturday, given he'd scored those 2, although we do know that Leahy is someone who normally takes penalties for the teams that he plays in. A couple of interesting things here. As I mentioned before on this, I never really focused too much on kind of out of possession binary metrics, but it is interesting to me that in terms of tackles per match, Wycombe are 22nd, and interceptions per match they're 17th, suggesting that for a team that they're not often, you see with kind of possession dominant sides, that they'll be low down here because they have the ball for the most part. So why would they be intercepting and tackling too much? But Wycombe aren't necessarily that. They average 50% possession over the course of the season. So it's interesting to me that they're relatively passive. There's obviously no issue with that. And then if we look at goals scored this season, it's an amazing spread. 13 different players have scored this season. Sadly, the only one who scored one goal that was a penalty. Otherwise, it's 12 goals from players from either set pieces or open play. Fred Onyedinma's goal scoring form has been really impressive to see. Daniel Udo's come in and done really well from Shrewsbury. Cameron Humphreys we'll talk about in a bit. But top goal scorer is Richard Kone, who's got 9 goals this season. Now, this, in my mind, is an unbelievable piece of recruitment. To go out and sign a guy from non-league, to integrate him slowly into, he's playing at Athletic Newham, which is actually the borough that I live in. So I should have gone down and seen him. But the fact that he was playing Athletic Newham in this calendar year and was signed by Wycombe, and they've slowly been able to translate him from the Essex Senior League to League One football, probably doesn't get enough credit. He scored 9 goals this season. You look at his shot location, 6.53 XG, so he is overperforming his XG a little bit. But those shot locations are exactly where you'd want them to be, between the posts, in the box, and that's where his goals have come from too. Now, I don't want to ruin or spoil the party for Richard Kone, but it is, on FotMob you can see where the ball placement is, where the finishing, where he's putting the ball, and all of his goals are on the left-hand side of the goal when you face it, which is fairly weird. So goalkeepers, if you're listening, if you've got Richard Kone running at you, dive right, is what I'm trying to say, because he hasn't scored a single goal yet put to the keeper's left. His numbers are very strong. His XG on target is 7.16, so again, really, really good. 33 shots, 17 on target, so he's often testing the keeper. It's very hard not to be incredibly impressed with him and what he's doing. If we look at the FotMob ratings table as well for Wycombe, Cameron Humphreys tops it on loan from Ipswich, been an exceptional player. But it's interesting to note that 3 of their top 4 highest rated players this season as per FotMob are loans, where Aaron Morley in 4th, 7.31 on loan from Bolton, and Caleb Taylor, the centre-back, 7.32 on loan from West Brom. Now, last year we saw Wycombe invest a lot of faith in really young loans, Freddie Potts being the pick of those, but they were generally players who hadn't played much first-team football. And it's really interesting to me, this time they've gone out, and certainly in the case of Morley, who's something of a seasoned pro, albeit not particularly old player, but also Humphreys, who's played a lot of football for Ipswich, and Caleb Taylor, who's had successful loans in the past. They've gone out and signed players who have proven at first team level that they're ready for this step up, and they're reaping the rewards for that. Really smart recruitment from them. Just a quick look at Humphreys, because he's a player who was a part of 21 under 21 a couple of years ago. Because of Ipswich's amazing progression from League One up into the Premier League, he kind of struggled for game time just because they left him behind a bit, really, rather than it being any issue with him. Kieran McKenna said to be a massive fan, and he's really proving himself at Wycombe this season. He scored 3 goals already this campaign, 25 shots. He's a consistent goal threat. He's really good on the ball. He's creative, already with 3 assists too, creating 10 chances. He's a ball carrier. He's someone who likes to get on the ball and beat players and drive into the final third. He wins a lot of fouls, 29 already this season. And finally, he's scrappy. He's someone who, despite what I said earlier about Wycombe not being particularly proactive off the ball, he is someone that, despite being an attacking midfield player, gets involved. He's very, very energetic. He breaks down play well, and he wins the ball in the final third for them in important areas. So there's loads to like about Wycombe. I don't see any real reason why there won't be a force going forward from here to the end of the season. In Kone, they've got a player who's scoring goals from the right areas. In Humphreys, they've got a creative player who's fairly consistent in doing so. They've got loads of quality, proven quality within the side, from the likes of McCleary and Onyedinma to the additions of Morley and Taylor. There might be a couple of red flags in terms of the XG4 numbers, but I think the way to end this is just to say, Matt Bloomfield, what a job you are doing, because this is a side where individuals are improving in front of our eyes. The performances of the team are improving as we go. There's no reliance on having loads of the ball to create chances or anything like that. They are just a really, really strong team, and that comes often down to the manager, who, let's not forget, 6 or 7 months ago, there were a lot of Wycombe Wanderers fans calling for his head. And so this is a case, as we're seeing more and more, I think, now, where teams who retain the faith in a manager, especially a rookie manager like Bloomfield, who came into the job having never done it before, maybe just needs a bit of time to get their feet under the table and work out what they're doing, and then they can reap the rewards.
Just on Saturday's game as well, there were a couple of excellent goals in this one. Obviously, Tendai Darikwa scored a really good individual effort from range for Lincoln, but Fred Onyedinma's goal, Wycombe's second goal, absolutely exquisite team goal, one of the best goals that you will see this season. Now, while we're talking about exquisite goals, that's quite a nice link to Mr. Louis Barry, because he was at it again for Stockport at the weekend in their 3-0 victory over Burton. He really is a bit of a wizard, isn't he?
I just can't remember many players doing what he's doing right now. And maybe that's because it's very rare that you have a player who plays, who's as good as he is playing in League One. He made the first goal where he just basically charged the goal, and there was a bit of a scramble with the keeper and the defender, and it kind of wormed its way through to Lewis Bate, who had an open goal to score into. But then both the goals themselves were just him being so impressive and so good. His ball carrying, it's amazing. I'd love to know, this is another stat we can ask people to come up with, carry per goal, where the amount of times he gets on the ball and it's him. It's him bringing the ball forward, and it's him getting the ball into the space in order to find the finish, and he often does find the finish as well. The second of them, just the classic Louis Barry down the left hand side, cutting onto his right foot and just bending it past the keeper. There are so many parts of football where you feel like a skill set wouldn't translate higher up. If you're at League One level, you might be a very good passer, or you might be someone who's creative from deep, or you might be able to spin out tight spaces, but it's hard, as you go up and the opposition become better, it's hard to replicate that. For Barry, I don't see why his ability to skip past defenders and fire shots into the top corner isn't something he'll be able to replicate at a higher level. The issue for Stockport is now going to be keeping him, because he's got to be one of the hottest bits of property going in English football in January. And given where Aston Villa are right now, it feels unlikely to me that there's an obvious pathway for him to break into the Villa first team. It feels like it's probably a case of them selling him with some kind of a buyback option in case he does well. But he can't surely be in League One for long. I'd love to know what Stockport are doing behind the scenes in order to try and just beg Villa to persuade them that he is worth persisting with them until the summer. But he had a serious injury last season, and I guess for Villa, if you're looking at an asset who's going to be worth 10 million quid plus, you probably want to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because if Villa are thinking about protecting their asset, maybe they are better off leaving him in League One with Stockport, a team that he knows well. And, if he continues to do this sort of thing for the second half of the season, his value would be really high in the summer. Or, of course, they could look to cash in January. We will see. That is pure speculation. But by our calculations, Louis is the top scorer at this stage of a League One season since Kiefer Moore for Rotherham back in 2017-18.
Incredible. Who's very different players. I mean, it's worth saying as well on that point about the resale value. I remember when Oxford sold Chandon Baptiste to Brentford, there was uproar amongst the Oxford fans about selling him in January at quite an important time in quite a big season. And I remember speaking to someone at the club who basically said exactly that. He was like, he's had a serious knee injury. We cannot risk it happening again, and then we lose out on this windfall. And I think with Barry, it's probably a similar case where, from a romantic perspective, it would be great just to be stay at Stockport, take them up. You can probably be with them in the Championship next season again. But it's so fragile. It's so tough. Look at Ollie Arblas there at Sheffield United last week. These things can happen. And, I hope to anything that Barry can stay fit and keep doing what he's doing. But even though Aston Villa are one of the richest clubs probably in the world, to be honest, at the moment, given the investment we've seen there, 12 million quid or whatever it's being muted, it's not an insignificant amount of money. But I hope I'm wrong, and I'm sorry to Stockport fans listening for selling to Louis Barry. That's not what I'm trying to do. He should stay. He should score 40 goals. He should have a Ronaldo season in League One. And then hopefully they can, maybe then Stockport can stump up the cash to buy him in the summer.
As someone who backed Stockport to go up before a ball was kicked, I would be all for that.
I'm in the same boat.
There were 3 more away wins in League One this weekend. Let's start with Peterborough 1, Reading 2. Posh, who have been so strong at home in recent weeks, defeated by Reading, their first win since the end of October. Ruben Sellers' Royals are up to 8th.
Yeah, it's quite a weird game, this. I mean, Reading took their chances early, Harvey Nibbs at the double, and then it was just a Peterborough onslaught, really. Like wave after wave of attack, loads of opportunities to score. Didn't manage it until the 7th minute of added time, and by then it was too late. There'll be massive frustration for Posh if they weren't able to at least get something out of the game. But having watched it back, it's basically just wastefulness in front of goal and some decent saves that stop them from doing so. So I wouldn't be overly critical of Posh here, but a really big win for Reading. And yeah, as I say, Pereira in goal for Reading, making a couple of important saves, but they were pretty good throughout. And having had a bit of a wobble, I guess, in terms of being struggling to win games, to go to Peterborough and win it is a bit of a signal of intent.
There were also 2 1-0 wins for teams and managers who have possibly been a little bit under pressure. Barnsley 0, Wigan 1. Wigan's first league win since the 1st of October. Barnsley's first league defeat at home since opening night. I must admit, George, I didn't see this one coming.
No, nor did I really. Wigan, I would say, are not a team to go 1-0 down against, because even though they're having a difficult season, they are very, very solid defensively, as Barnsley found out. Quite enjoying this new Thelo Asgard striker we're seeing. We're suddenly becoming, always, in my mind, a very good, tricky attacking player, good ball carrier. Suddenly seeing him as an aerial player, scoring a header here, had a couple of good headers saved, adding more to his game. Because he's a player who should score more goals. So yeah, once Wigan went ahead, they were able to keep Barnsley relatively quiet, and that's going to be the key for them. They've struggled for goals all season. Dale Taylor playing through the middle for them here with Asgard just off him. They have the personnel, whether it's Taylor or Hugill or Asgard, to score goals. I think it's more of a system issue where their chance creation numbers are so poor, but they found a way to get through here. And as I say, I think when they go ahead, they're going to be a hard nut to crack, because they are very, very solid.
The final away win in League One this weekend was a really big one for Matt Taylor and Bristol Rovers. They went up to Mansfield and won 1-0.
A really big win for Matt Taylor and Bristol Rovers up against a side Mansfield who, they don't really give much away generally, especially at home. This was the one I probably was most surprised about in terms of a result this weekend. The goal came from McCormick just after half-time. It was a relatively open game. Mansfield will feel like they had enough opportunities within the game to score, but were unable to do so. Griffiths in goal for Bristol Rovers played very well. But yeah, this is significant, I think, for Bristol Rovers, who, after an alright start to the season, it kind of feels mad to me they're up in 13th now. They were a team who I was pretty concerned about a couple of weeks ago. But wins like this will mean a lot, and it does feel like their performances are improving as we go. Again, I'd put Mansfield into the category here of Peterborough, where defensively I guess they could have been better, but from an attacking standpoint they did enough in the game probably to score. They were just unable to divert the ball home.
On to the home wins then, and Wrexham beat Exeter 3-0. Wrexham continue to impress at home, but it really was death by set pieces or balls into the box for Exeter.
Yeah, it was, as is always kind of the case. I think the best assist here came from Ryan Barnett, a pod favourite, with a really good ball to Palmer before Cleworth scored from a set piece, as did Rathbone. All 3 goals headers. Exeter aren't a side that concede much or many chances, so maybe the best way to beat them is just to dominate at set pieces, and that's exactly what Wrexham were able to do here. Another 3-goal haul at home, continuing this trend of Wrexham just being a really good free scoring attacking side at home, and then a team away from home who can't really fashion too much in terms of attacking threat, which is a bit strange, but so long as they continue picking up these kind of points and these wins at home, they'll have no issue keeping pace with those towards the top.
Yeah, and obviously a lot has been said about Joe Whitworth this season. A fantastic young goalkeeper, an excellent shot stopper who is really good with his feet. I think the one thing for me that he needs to develop is his physicality, his ability to come and claim the ball. And I really feel as though Wrexham did sort of prey on that in this game. Huddersfield, they're up to 5th after another home win. They beat Charlton 2-1. 2 Matties on the score sheet. David Kasumu bagging the winner. What did you make of this one?
Harsh red card, I think, was probably the one here. Greg Doherty being sent off after 35 minutes for what looked like a pretty bad tackle. I mean, I'd have to see it again if I'm wrong. So apologies if I am, but it just looked like a late one, but not necessarily a malicious one or a particularly dangerous one. And that kind of changed the game. just after Matty Godden had got the penalty to equalise after a Pearson header. I thought the goal to win it was really nicely taken. Kasumi with a really good strike from the edge of the box to make the point safe. Say Huddersfield after that wobble, and then a disappointing draw away at Crawley last time in the league. And Mike Duff's side are starting to kind of hit their straps again, and they feel like one of the teams who are benefiting a little bit from Birmingham picking up just 2 points in their last 3 games, and are kind of eating into that deficit a little bit, because it does, even though Wycombe top the league now and are so impressive in doing so, I'm pretty sure teams like Huddersfield and Bolton who had starts the season where they would have preferred to have picked up more points, will be looking at just kind of keeping pace with Birmingham as being the benchmark to ensure that you're up there at the end.
Speaking of Bolton, they beat Blackpool 2-1 at the Tough Sheet. They went 1-0 down, but an absolute thronker from George Thomason brought them level, and then a late winner from Aaron Collins. Absolute scenes at the end.
Yeah, I feel for Steve Bruce at the moment. He's obviously gone through a tough time at home, and since he's returned, it feels like Blackpool just are completely luckless. Their performances are no way near as bad as the results are right now, and this was another occasion where they can probably come away feeling a little bit aggrieved as to having not got anything from the game. Carl Joseph with a really brave and challenging with the keeper to score the first. He is very brave. He's a player that I like a lot, and I'm delighted to see him getting in amongst the goals now, because in terms of work ethic and strength and all the physical attributes you want, he's got it in spades. And he's got an eye for goal too. As you say, Thomason with one of the goals of the day. What a strike to make it 2-1. And then absolute scenes in the 94th minute with Aaron Collins scoring, ripping his shirt off and running towards the bench. Delighted for him. He hasn't had a great season so far. I was expecting quite a lot of him. I didn't think Bolton were amazing here. But finding a way to win is incredibly important for Ian Evatt and his side. It kind of feels like so often they can wipe the floor with an opposition team and give them no chance. But often when they're a bit flat, that's when they drop points. And this was a day, I think, where they were a bit flat, but were able to find a way to pick up all 3 points. But as I say, I think with Blackpool, having not been particularly enamoured with the Bruce appointment to start with, it would be easy to sit here and be like, well, look, they're doing rubbish when Bruce is in charge. But I do think there is a lot of context to this. And as I say, I personally don't think they're anywhere near as bad as the run suggests. They haven't won in the league since September the 28th, a 3-0 home win against Burton. But they're in a fair few games in there where they've deserved more than they've got. Right,
George, we're going to play a game. I'm going to read a quote.
Oh, my God.
I'm going to read a quote, and you have to guess who said
Ian
it.
Holloway.
It's not Ian Holloway. I'm not going to do the accent, though, because that will give it away. The quote is, "We're here without big players. Illness has been in the camp since Wednesday, Thursday. Credit to 5 or 6 of the players. They've gone out to play. They've not played very well, but they've gone out to play."
They've not played very well. Steve-O. Yeah, this is... Yeah, I mean, it's Steve Evans. It's a 1-0 away defeat against Crawley. I feel like the clock has got to be ticking on Steve Evans. And even though I'm sure what he said is correct, it's quite funny to be like, we played terribly because we had a sickness bug. No, they all played. But yeah, we had a bug, and that's why we were so bad. I mean, as a manager, you're always going to look to try and find reasons and excuses as to why a team performed badly in order to save your own skin and to divert the criticism away from you. And I think it's understandable that he's doing that. Crawley won this game through a Will Swan goal. Rotherham came close a couple of times. Johnson Clark-Harris before the goal came itself. They hit the woodwork late on. They probably will feel they did enough in the game to get a point. They're miles off it. They're miles off where they should be, Rotherham, considering what we're used to seeing from them when they come down from the Championship under Paul Warne. They should be competitive at the top end of the table, and they're absolutely not that right now. They are just struggling to create much of note fairly consistently. And for Crawley and Rob Elliott, this is another big win. It kind of feels now like Scott Lindsay going to MK Dons and Rob Elliott coming to Crawley is kind of suiting everyone at the moment, where they've improved, MK have improved, and everyone's happy.
There were 2 more games in League One this weekend. Stevenage 0, Leyton Orient 0, and Northampton 0, Cambridge 0 were both matches that happened. In League 2, there were 3 matches that didn't happen, and Port Vale v Crewe, also known as first v second heading into the weekend, is taking place on Monday night. So it was a bit of a reduced docket over the weekend. The big winners at the top were Walsall, who beat AFC Wimbledon 1-0, and it was a new friend of the pod who scored the winner.
Nathan Lowe with the goal. If you haven't listened, Nathan spoke to Ali on the feed last week off the back of him winning EFL Young Player of the Month. Lovely guy. It's amazing how whenever Ali and I do these interviews, we're always struck by how nice and personable all these guys, all these kids are that we speak to. And Nathan was part of that. Good sense of humour, really bright, really affable, just a really nice guy. And he's definitely someone who I think off the back of that will be keeping a very close eye on his future. And he's another one where this boy isn't for League Two. Like, again, I don't want to be, having already sold Stockport's loanee, I don't want to start selling Walsall's, another team that I've backed with the league. But he's clearly got it. And this was not much to do with him. Some good work down the right. Cagbu just played it inside, and Lowe was there kind of in between the posts, sliding in to divert home. He's a player that I think, he's on loan from Stoke, and I just find it very hard to believe that he wouldn't be quite useful to Stoke right now, if I'm honest. But we'll still have to enjoy him whilst he's there. This is another, I mentioned it on the betting show, AFC Wimbledon's home form is a bit of a concern. Beaten 1-0 at home to Grimsby, drew 2-2 against Accrington in a game where they were 2-0 down with 10 minutes to go, and then lose 1-0 to Walsall. They are still a side that don't give much away, but having played a few of the weaker teams at home early in the season, you're kind of wondering if now, against a side like Walsall, who, to my mind, have to be one of the kind of one or two title favourites. There wasn't much between the two teams on the day. It's one of those games where there are a few chances between the two. Again, Wimbledon went close late on, hitting the crossbar to try and find the equaliser. Were unable to repeat the trick from midweek. And I guess part of it might be that, Walsall had a week off, and Dons, having played that game and, a pretty testing game that went pretty late into the night with a goal coming in the 98th minute, that was certainly of an advantage to Walsall. So, Walsall doing their credentials no harm whatsoever. Dons struggling to kind of keep the momentum up. And we should mention again, having mentioned fatigue, they of course missed those games early on in the campaign because of their pitch, so having to deal with that as well.
Yeah, it's 6 goals and 3 assists in Nathan Lowe's last 9 games in all competitions. Now, if I was a Walsall fan, I would be desperate for Leicester City to start scoring a few more goals and start winning a few more games, because if Tom Cannon was to get recalled, that could be a bit of an issue, but that is just speculation. 3 more away wins now. Harrogate made it back-to-back wins. They beat Chesterfield last week. They beat Gillingham this weekend. How did they do it?
By taking their chances. I mean, it's worrying now for Gills, I've got to say. I think it's 5 defeats in their last 6 at home, which is a bit of a problem, especially when you take the lead. And they were by far the better team to the goal too, with Dieng scoring just after half time. They dominated the first half. It was just reward for their performance within that first half, and then they just let Harrogate back in. O'Connor scoring the first, and then Marsh with the 1-on-1 that he fired into the bottom left hand corner. And Harrogate aren't a team that Gillingham would expect to cause them loads of trouble. Like, we should give Harrogate some credit when you consider they've beaten in a week against Chesterfield, and Gillingham to pick up 6 points is mightily impressive, and a real blow to those at the bottom end of the table, hoping that Harrogate would be one of the strugglers this season, because they're racking up a points tally now that is going to give them a nice gap between them and the bottom two. But for Gillingham, they've got to find a way to keep teams out and defend a lead at home, because after starting the season so well, things have unravelled to a degree that, even I, as someone who kind of mentioned that I didn't think they were necessarily as good as their start was, I didn't anticipate this to happen. And it's probably an element of variance here as well, where they're probably not quite as bad or as poor as the results are suggesting. And even in this game, I think you could argue that was the case. But huge result for Harrogate, and Gills need to find a way to turn it around fast.
Unfortunately for Gills, when you look at their last 5 home league games, obviously they beat Port Vale last time out, which was a fantastic result, but they've lost to Grimsby, Accrington, Newport, and now Harrogate. And I mean, no disrespect to those sides whatsoever, but I think a Gillingham side that did start the season so well, that are looking to push on in League Two this season, will be bitterly disappointed to lose those games. Another team who will be bitterly disappointed to lose this game will be Swindon Town, because they lost 3-2 at home to Morecambe in what was a bit of a 6-pointer, to be honest with you. Now, we've all heard about Ian Holloway getting his wife to come in and sort out the training ground, try and get rid of any ghosts, but really, they need to work on their defending from set pieces, don't they?
So this game finished 1-0 if you take out set pieces. It was the first 4 goals were all from set pieces, either corners, free kicks or long throws. Only the winner from Morecambe coming from open play. Both teams, I would say, probably have to sort out their defensive set pieces, albeit maybe with Morecambe and Harry Smith being the target for Swindon, you could forgive them a little bit. But yeah, I mean, Stott and Tollett scoring 2 goals from set pieces after 15 minutes was not the start that Swindon wanted. Ryan profiting from Smith's height, running onto the kind of knockdown to make it 2-1. Delaney scoring just after half time to make it 2-2 with a header direct from a set piece. And then it was just so easy. You had a moment for the joining goal. You could hear after half an hour the Swindon fans singing "You Don't Know What You're Doing," and Ian Holloway referred to that in his post-match interview where he said, "I do know what I'm doing. I do know what I'm doing. The fans may say I don't know what I'm doing, but I do know what I'm doing," which is, after 3 or 4 games in charge, a bit of a concern. After Delaney scored to make it 2-2, Holloway turned to the fans and started punching his chest and hitting the badge, trying to get everyone up for it. And then it was just such an easy goal. Just a ball clipped down the right-hand side. I don't understand what the Swindon defenders thought they were doing. No awareness at all for Hallam Hope's running behind. I think the wind helped him a little bit, seemed to kind of hold the ball up. And he just fired it past the keeper with a muted celebration for his 30 games and 7 goals that he scored for Swindon a few years ago. I think Swindon are one of those teams where, it's, as an Oxford fan, it's always kind of strange to talk about this. But, we look at it from the outside, we as neutrals, and we see a team really struggling, and we see Holloway coming in and everything else. But talk to a Swindon fan, and they are really concerned about the immediate future of their club, and they are really concerned about the direction they're taking under Clem Morfuni, and they're really worried. And rivalries, in my mind at least, massively go to one side when you've got a team and a fan base who are feeling this disenfranchised with their football club. So, I guess the kind of the obvious things to say is that Swindon Town are in danger of getting relegated out of League Two. The way they're playing right now, it gives me no reason for any optimism whatsoever in terms of Holloway being able to turn it around. You've got a manager who said himself after leaving Grimsby that he didn't feel like League Two management suited him at all, that he didn't know any of the players at League Two, and his recruitment style didn't work whatsoever. And then you've got the fact that the fan base don't believe that the owner has good intentions anymore, or has the wherewithal to continue the successful running of a football club, or even to implement the successful running of a football club. So I'm really concerned for them, and I say that without a smile on my face, because if this was just a possible relegation without the kind of existential issues that surround it, and without the genuine problems that Swindon fans are concerned about, then then I guess it's all fun and games and giggles when it's just football. But fingers crossed there is a resolution here, because they're the one team in the EFL right now that I'm really concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important that we keep using platforms such as this to talk about the likes of Reading, Morecambe, Swindon, etc., etc. We can't let that conversation die. I mean, on Swindon and their set-piece defending, it's now 6 goals conceded in their last 3 games from set pieces, 2 in each game. That is simply not sustainable. And then if anyone has ever played Football Manager in the past, they will know what happens when a former player comes on. Hallam Hope scoring the winner for Morecambe. A fantastic win for them. There was also a fantastic away win for Colchester, who went up to Grimsby, and they came away with all 3 points.
Yeah, late goal winning this one for them. Grimsby will feel like they maybe had the better of the game until the goal as well. Had a goal disallowed and a couple more opportunities that they were unable to take before Gordon scored a really well taken goal, his first goal for the club, and a nice strike it was too, to win it. And not loads between the 2 games, just a case of who was more clinical, and on the day it was John Kamani Gordon who scored the all-important goal.
There were 2 home wins in League 2 this weekend, and they were both 1-0 wins, both with 89th minute winners. Slightly different strikes. Let's talk about Chesterfield 1, Barrow 0 first. Jamie Grimes nodding home the winner. Important for Chesterfield to get back to winning ways.
Yeah, they bit of soul-searching needed for Chesterfield after a defeat against Harrogate last time out. And obviously the 3-0 defeat against Accrington too. And I guess no surprise here, you Barrow are a team that generally drive goals into binary numbers. We have zeros and ones basically when Barrow come to town. And Chesterfield, the highest scorers in the division, were unable to kind of find their attacking verve. But maybe a win like this, where they kind of grounded out and found a way late on with a scrappy goal, having conceded very, very little in terms of opportunities from Barrow, is an important way to win this game rather than their normal free-flowing selves. Yeah, significant. And two teams who've started the season well, with kind of aspirations to finish towards the top end of the table. This will feel like a big win for Paul Cook and his side.
Cheltenham beat Tranmere 1-0 on Friday night, and this one was won by a delightful strike from young Joel Colwill. Things are definitely looking quite rosy for Cheltenham now, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. I didn't really see it coming. When you look back now, their opening fixtures were really tough. They had to face... early in the season, they faced Wimbledon and Walsall, games that are probably aged as looking more difficult than they were at the time. They went and got a point at Chesterfield. They lost to Fleetwood. All of these teams they lost against, Barrow, have gone on to have really good starts to the season. But since they've faced some teams who've struggled, the likes of Colchester, Carlisle, and now Tranmere, they've been winning. And this is why often there's a lot of context that should come into these things. And for Cheltenham, having looked like a likely relegation candidate, or at least a team who are going to be battling relegation, the ability to beat teams who've struggled is a very important way of picking up points over the course of the season. Again, I wouldn't say they were exceptional here. It was a pretty tight game, and it looked like it was going to be fizzling out towards a 0-0 draw before, as you say, Joel Colwill scored a really, really good strike. Credit to them. Again, frustration for Tranmere, who are kind of keep looking like they might be putting something together, only to kind of fall off afterwards. They followed up that win over Newport with a win that had gone under the radar, I think, where they went to Stockport in the EFL trophy and against a decent Stockport side and won that. I don't normally kind of care about results in that format, but it did feel like that was a particularly significant win, the back of a league win. So yeah, Nigel Atkins will be frustrated that they came away with a defeat, albeit against a moment of quality against Cheltenham.
Elsewhere in League Two, Notts County v Newport and Carlisle v Doncaster were both matches that happened. Unfortunately, Bradford v Accrington, Fleetwood v MK Dons and Salford v Bromley were matches that didn't happen. George, what fun. Are you ready to do it all again on Wednesday morning?
Absolutely. I cannot wait. And Matt, just to say, thank you very much for doing this. You've been an absolute star. I know that getting a call 24 hours before having to do a pod like this must be quite stressful, but you're a valued member of the NTT20 family and you've done a great job. And I think everyone else should go and subscribe to NTT20.com and listen to Under the Lights.
Thank you. And thank you for having me as well. I think it was Ian Wright who said when he did Match of the Day, "This is my Graceland." Well, for me, as an EFL fan, being on this podcast, this is my Graceland. I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you to the listeners as well for tuning in. All that's left for me to say is go well.